Alright guys, HatchCarmick again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Big drama over the last couple of days with the new patch update for Season 2 coming into effect. What is going on with the new maps, but also the new weapons potentially in the game. Shotzzy reveals that what they scrimmed Optic Texas over the last couple of days, there could have been potentially a 4-weapon meta in play, and he does not at all believe Scrappy's idea that there'd be 8 BP-50s on the map if that weapon was to be allowed. Will the pros change their mind on this supposed gentleman's agreement? Will Optic get their way on this one? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'll greatly appreciate it. Just wanted to address this because I saw this a while ago. Not sure I ever put it in a video. I actually might have done at one point. I thought they might have fixed this, but they didn't. So there is still a spot on top of the map here on Karachi where you can jump on this little invisible pixel. Now I don't know exactly what the rules are in, shall we say, the CDL rule set, whether you're actually allowed to do pixel walks like this. You're probably not. Like a spot like this is possibly illegal in the CDL rules. I'm not actually sure, but it's certainly a spot that would be GA'd by the pros. But if someone was to pull this out in a game, it's obviously like an interesting spot, right? Because you're up in the air, you're very vulnerable, but it's a spot that you could potentially use in a search and destroy to get a competitive advantage. And if it's not banned in the official rules, then you can probably count on a team like the Seattle Surge maybe to pull it out. If anyone even cares anymore, I did see this UX defiant, although to be honest, like they say that it's going to release before the 31st of March, confirmed by Ubisoft, but I think they kind of confirmed release dates before and they never really happened, so I guess we'll just have to stay tuned for that. Bit more cheating drama as well here. So yesterday we talked about some questions on some of those FaZe Back Academy players. This is an interesting clip for you guys. Here from this guy Raxi. I think Raxi was talking trash on TJ, wasn't he, a while ago, which is why well, I think we talked about it before, but have a look at this 3-piece here. I think people are really looking at the first kill is fine. The second kill, like, that's pretty impressive, like centering on this second player, doesn't miss a shot, but it's really the third kill that people are looking at, because look at that snap that he hits there. Like from there to there is kind of, well, and what do we think about this? Now look, it's only one frame, so you know, you can argue whether when you're playing on 200 and whatever frames a second and you're looking at a slow motion video that isn't really in the frame, it's difficult to say. So I'm not sure that I would say this is a guaranteed or 100% he's hacking or whatever. Look, this clip is pretty suspect. To the ones that we've seen over the last few days, this is one of the more suspect ones that I think I've seen, to be fair. And we then get some replies here from Cruz, and Parasite is just saying, like, look, I'm not going to say anything, but this guy's absolutely licked. Even Doug's in the replies. And then he goes on to say, Doug, that I have massive trust issues with COD because of the fact that I've watched people make careers out of straight up cheating, and I'm afraid that it won't ever stop. So, yeah, more cheating drama. The reality is that Doug can retire, but Doug getting involved in cheating stuff is probably never going to be going away. But there's been lots of talk over the last few days about the new maps coming into play. Rio is officially a thing. It's in for Hardpoint, it's in for Search and Destroy. These are the callouts as well, because Zed and JP, they put together videos on like the pro callouts, and well, TAC Maps kind of reflected those in their website right here. So that's kind of what that's looking like if you guys are unfamiliar with the map as it stands. There's also been further talk though, do further changes need to be made, especially because there are some decent maps in last year's game. There's very few, I would say. I'm not really a massive fan of many of these, although I will say Hotel, I actually really kind of liked Hotel, and if Hotel was to return to this game, I'd be down for it. Not sure it's going to happen personally. They could play Mercado, to be fair, but we're getting new maps such as Rio, such as Vista, maybe such as Departures, but there was lots of talk as to whether the pros would actually be able to try those maps. I know that Zuma was trying to speak to the CDL. He actually mentioned this on stream yesterday, that Zuma's been trying to speak to the league to see if they can extend the deadline for when maps have to be trialed, because, you know, usually how it's gone is that it's the Monday before the matches start when everything must be locked in. The new rules, the new modes, whatever. It's usually on the Monday that it happens. And that's the case for rosters this time as well. But for whatever reason, well, I actually explained it yesterday, the reason, but I'll mention it again. It was Tuesday, for some reason, the day before the massive patch update arrived on the Wednesday, when the map set was locked in for the Stage 2 qualifiers and apparently the Stage 2 major as well. So Zuma said, look, can we not push that back to Monday so the pros can at least try Vista in practice for the next couple of days, and then they can make a decision whether it's in or not by Monday evening or whenever they have to come up with the rule set officially going forwards. I'm not sure he's going to get very far on that. The CDL said that, well, you know, we want to keep everything the same for the Challengers Cup this weekend, and maybe that's fair enough, but it does feel a massive waste to have a map that potentially could be really good for competitive play, and many pros, including Abizi, said that he loves Vista, thinks it's an awesome map and it should definitely be in, and a lot of the pros are in favor of it, but apparently it's not going to happen for various reasons. The thing that the pros do control, however, is the meta that is being used. What weapons are used, what weapons are allowed, and we saw the Ram 9 come into effect from an SMG standpoint, and we saw the BP50 come into effect from an AR standpoint, both of which have been GA'd by the European players, and I'm not sure it's necessarily official yet that they've been GA'd by the pros, but they almost certainly have. Another frustrating thing that kind of gets me about the way the pros handle GAs, and I kind of understand it because, you know, it's not always easy. You want to stick to the status quo at times, but quite often what will happen is there's a weapon that's really strong at the start of the game's life cycle. It gets GA'd immediately. The pros then use something else. That weapon that was powerful then gets nerfed and is possibly viable and not too overpowered anymore, but the pros don't even touch it, right? Because they just stick with what they know. And I understand why that is, but it's still kind of frustrating. And it's also frustrating when you get weapons that might not actually be that powerful, but are banned simply because the pros want to keep with how it is. So the BP50 was causing a lot of controversy. We saw when Clayster was mapping Brack with it just yesterday, and it's a very, you know, the handling is very good, the recoil isn't very significant. It should be a very powerful gun, and I think that it is a very powerful gun. Does that mean, though, that it's so powerful that the only best strategy in that meta is to use 8 BP50s on the map at one time, especially when there's already sometimes 8 MCWs on the map? So Shotzzy kind of goes into this here in a second. We saw these tweets between Dashy and Scrappy when Dashy was making the point that, you know, these guns get GA'd immediately. This doesn't make any sense, saying the MCW is literally better. The BP50 isn't even that good. And Scrappy said, oh yeah, sure, we'll use 4 VPs against you on Invasion. Then what was interesting about this actually is that all these tweets they got deleted, right, from Scrappy's side. Dashy's one stayed up. So I do wonder whether, like, did they play a scrim, do you think, between Optic and Toronto, and actually Optic did win with, you know, using their own decided meta with maybe 1 BB50, 1 Ram 9, 1 Rival, 1 MCW, and we'll discuss what Shotzzy says on that in a second. And therefore Scrapper was like, okay, I need to delete the evidence of this because, you know, I've just said that we would slam them using 4 BB50s and maybe it didn't happen. To be fair, if that actually was the case, I imagine Dashy might have tweeted a screenshot or something of that particular scrim, but I don't know. It's interesting to contemplate at the very least. But of course, we also get Shotzzy giving his thoughts on the matter here as well, and what he felt playing in those scrims. I also feel like the pros just don't tend to test this for long enough. Like, they go off feel, really. They play like one evening of scrims with a new weapon, and then they just think, well, it seems a bit strong, it's time to go. Especially those teams that maybe have some incentive to do so because they're particularly good in the present meta, and they don't necessarily want that to change. So Shotzzy's feeling was using, he didn't even really like the BP50. I think personally, having seen it, I think it's pretty damn good. But as far as he's concerned, he definitely doesn't think there'd be 8 of them on the map at all. Completely disagrees with Strappy's perspective on that one. And also says that the Ram 9, he actually really rather liked it. Pred said that it was trash though, preferred the Rival, which kind of makes me believe that a 3-weapon meta, if not even a 4-weapon meta, could have been a realistic possibility, and even could still be a realistic possibility if the pros come to their senses, you could argue.
So whenever this BP bullshit came about, right? BP and Ram 9, okay, right? They wanted us to try the new guns, right? I was like, alright, bet. I was like, yo, give me the new sub, right? It was the Ram 9. I put some random ass attachments, found some good shit, right? And I was like, let me try this shit. So I used it the entire scrim. I was even using it on Invasion. I'm literally running this shit, feeling delusional, running this shit on Invasion, right? So I'm like, damn, this shit kind of rips, right? So then I'm like, yo, I kind of like this shit. So then Brandon was using FCW. I was using Ram 9, saying this shit's godlike. AG like, hey, shut the fuck up. That shit's ass. I'm like, and then Ken was using BP. AG was using Rival, right? I was like, dude, that shit felt nice. That was like our first scrim with it. And then I was like, I'm down to keep this shit in. I mean, yeah, and then that's kind of how my vote went. And then we tried it again today. And then today I was using Ram 9. I don't like the BP, bro. The BP, I think, can horrendous. I have a class and I tried using it. I don't know, dude. I don't really like it. So I don't know. That's why I'm kind of confused on the whole thing. Because I personally think the MCW is still superior. I guess everyone else's perspective, the majority, I guess I should say, is that the BP, there's just going to be 8 BPs on the map. Which, like, I disagree. And then, yeah, and then that point too, where there's already 8 MCWs. So what's the difference? I don't know. I guess the BP is just faster. Like, my argument is that the MCW, there's just no way I see APPs on the map. There's just no way.
So what do you guys think about Shotzi's opinion on this, right? Because, look, they played a few scrims on some of the smaller maps, I imagine, and he reckons that Optic were at times using 4 different guns. Like, we had Kenny on the BP50, Dashi on the MCW, Shotzi on the Ram 9, and then Pred on the Rival 9, which would be spectacular. And I'd love to have a world, and every year at some point we talk about a potential 3, even 4 weapon meta of guns that are viable. And I used to like the guns back in the day when everything was kind of viable based on personal preference. I know that I'm probably going to talk about Black Ops 3 again here, and I might well have to, but even without Banner Protect, the HVK, the Man of War, the M8s, like all of those guns were all viable if you wanted to use them in certain circumstances. They're actually designed, the way that they were designed in that game from a balancing perspective was to have a very similar time to kill based on the shots to kill and the fire rate of the weapon. So, and even games like Black Ops 2, another classic really, but you know, we're talking about the MSMC was the go-to SMG, but the PDW was viable at the start. Rambo used to like using the MP7, the Scorpion was viable in the hands of Scump and others, so there were several weapons that were all viable, and okay, there was one main gun that most people would use, but it was all to some degree personal preference, and if some players liked certain weapons, they liked the way that it handled, they liked the way that it recoiled, they would prefer that over using alternatives. And I think, you know, maybe it's not true, and without further evidence of practice for the pros, we're maybe not really going to know how good the BP really is, the BB50 or the Ram 9 really is. But if Shotzi really likes the Ram 9, and let's actually not forget there was the Ram 7, wasn't there, which I think was an AR, but that was in MW19, wasn't it? And I think that the likes of Parasite and Envoy, they kind of introduced that to the meta. Even in that game, like the Uzi became briefly viable. So there were some weapons that were, you know, good, and they were actually usable, and maybe there are other weapons in this game that are already usable, but the pros aren't using them because they just want to stick to what they know. And I definitely do miss the days of when personal preference ARs were, you know, what was happening, right? There were certain players, I think it was Killer actually, that they loved using the Man of War in Black Ops 3 on that Dream Team roster, so they would like ban the M8 in Banner Protect, and they would, you know, they'd prefer to use the Man of War, but that was like their go-to weapon in there, that's what they like to use, and this kind of personal preference, and even nowadays, like personal preference in terms of attachments barely exists either anyway, just because there are so many attachments, people seem to find what they know, and then everyone basically uses the same thing. There is some personal preference there, but it doesn't feel the same from the viewing standpoint as to when you've got 2 different main ARs or 2 different main SMGs using 2 different weapons because that's what they prefer. And I think the balance is potentially in the game to make that happen, but, you know, the pros are unwilling or whatever to do so. At least that's kind of Shotzi's perspective. Other pros probably have a different point of view. Scrappy, you know, probably still thinks that those weapons are way too strong, and they might be right, but in one night of scrims, you're probably not going to get the full picture on that, to be honest. I did want to mention that other clip actually there from Pred, because I thought it was pretty funny, grinding some Rio Search and Destroy in ranked, and not realizing that Rio Search is actually in the map pool, which I know made people laugh just because there was all this talk from Optic that they were going to be really grinding out the Search and Destroys, like they're really going to be focusing up on the Search and Destroy aspect and taking it to the next level, and Pred didn't even know that Rio was in the map pool, so maybe makes you question how much, you know, Search and Destroy practice Optic have been doing to try and better in that game mode over the last couple of weeks. But then Pred figures out, yeah, has been added in. But it's interesting, right? Because clearly the first time that Pred had played it, despite the fact that other teams had been apparently practicing Rio Search and Destroy for a good couple of days, because someone had to make the decision to put it into the map pool, and apparently Optic were not necessarily well prepared to do exactly that. But very much interested in your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.
Bro, I would literally beat the fuck out of this kangaroo. I promise you. Bro, he doesn't even know how to defend. Alright, if you pull one of those on me, I might fucking break down. I'm not gonna lie. It's a baby. Dude, I don't give a fuck what it is. Alright, never mind, actually. This is who AG thinks he is, bro. This is literally who AG thinks he is.